The morning air in the city carried a bite that hinted winter wasn't far off. Leaves, once bright and full of life, now crunched underfoot like brittle paper, and the sky hung low with a soft gray blanket of clouds. On a bench across from a small bakery, its windows fogged with warmth and the sweet smell of rising dough, sat an old man. He wore a coat that had seen better decades, its elbows thin and patched with careful stitches. His hands rested on his knees, fingers slightly curled, as if they remembered a time when they had something important to hold. He'd been coming to this spot for weeks now, always in the late morning when the bakery's rush slowed and the street emptied just enough for him to feel invisible. He wasn't begging, not exactly. He never held out a cup or asked strangers for change. But hunger had a way of wearing down pride, especially when you were alone and the world seemed to have forgotten your name. Inside the bakery, people laughed over coffee and croissants. A young couple shared a cinnamon roll, their fingers brushing as they pulled it apart. A mother wiped jam from her toddler's cheek while the child giggled. Through the glass, it all looked warm, safe, full of things he hadn't felt in a long time. His name wasn't important to anyone anymore. Not since his wife passed 2 winters ago. She'd been his anchor, his voice when he couldn't speak, his reason to get up when the days felt too heavy. After her funeral, the bills kept coming. The house, the medical debt, the silence that grew louder every night, it all became too much. He'd sold what he could, moved into a single room above a laundromat, and tried to disappear quietly. But hunger doesn't let you vanish. He used to play piano, not just play, really play. Back in his younger years, he'd performed in small jazz clubs, taught music at a community college, even recorded a few tracks that never made it past local radio. His fingers knew chords like old friends, but arthritis had crept in over the years, stiffening his joints, turning what once flowed like water into something slow and careful. Still, the music never left him. It lived in his chest, humming under his ribs, waiting. Today, something felt different. Maybe it was the cold pressing harder against his bones, or maybe it was the sight of a fresh loaf of bread cooling on the bakery's counter. Golden brown, crust crackling slightly as it settled. His stomach twisted. He stood slowly, knees protesting, and walked across the street. The bell above the bakery door jingled softly as he stepped inside. Warmth wrapped around him immediately, thick with the scent of yeast, butter, and sugar. A few customers glanced his way, curious, not unkind, but most returned to their conversations. Behind the counter stood a young man with flour dusting his forearms and a friendly smile that faded just a little when he saw the old man's worn shoes and thin coat. "Morning," the baker said, polite but cautious. The old man cleared his throat. His voice came out softer than he intended. "Good morning," he hesitated. This was the hard part, asking. He'd rehearsed the words in his head a dozen times on the bench, but now they stuck in his throat like dry bread. Finally, he said, I saw you have a piano in the corner." The baker followed his gaze to the far end of the shop, where an old upright piano sat beneath a shelf of jam jars. It hadn't been played in years, maybe not since the previous owner ran the place. Dust coated its lid and one of the pedals wobbled loosely. "Yeah," the baker said, wiping his hands on his apron. "It's more decoration than anything. Doesn't even work right, I think." The old man nodded slowly. "May I try it?" The baker raised an eyebrow but didn't say no. "Sure, go ahead." The old man walked over, his steps quiet on the tiled floor. He ran a hand over the piano's lid, then lifted it gently. The keys were yellowed with age, some chipped at the edges, but they were still there, 88 of them waiting. He sat on the bench, which creaked under his weight. He flexed his fingers, wincing slightly at the stiffness, then placed them on the keys. He didn't play anything fancy at first, just a simple C major chord. The note rang out, slightly out of tune, but clear enough. It felt good, real. He glanced toward the counter. The baker was watching now, arms crossed, but not unkindly. Then the old man took a breath and said the words he'd been carrying all morning. "Can I play for food?" The baker blinked. "Play for food?" "Yes," the old man said, meeting his eyes. "If I play something nice. Could I have a loaf of bread? Or maybe a bowl of soup, just something to eat?" For a moment, the baker didn't respond. He looked around the shop at the few customers, at the piano, then back at the old man. There was no anger in his face, no mockery, just surprise and maybe a little uncertainty. Then he smiled, small but genuine. "All right," he said. "Play something that makes someone stop what they're doing. If you do that, you've got yourself a meal, the old man nodded. That was fair. Better than fair, really. He turned back to the piano. His heart beat a little faster. Not from nerves, but from something deeper. Hope, maybe. Your purpose. He closed his eyes for just a second, remembering. His wife used to sit in the front row of every little gig he played, even when the crowd was just 3 people and a bartender. She'd always say, "Play like you're talking to me." So he did. His fingers found the opening notes of Autumn Leaves. It was a song full of longing, of beauty and letting go, perfect for this gray morning, for this moment in his life. At first, the notes were tentative, careful, but as he played, something shifted. His hands remembered. The stiffness faded into the background, replaced by muscle memory and feeling. The melody unfolded slowly, like a story being told in whispers. Outside, a woman walking her dog paused at the window. Inside, the young couple stopped talking. The toddler, mid-bite into a muffin, stared at the piano with wide eyes. Even the baker leaned against the counter, arms no longer crossed, just listening. The music wasn't flashy. It didn't need to be. It was honest. It carried the weight of years, of love lost, of quiet endurance, of still showing up even when the world feels cold. And in that small bakery, for those few minutes, it filled every corner with something warmer than bread. When the last note faded into silence, no one moved right away. Then the little girl clapped just once shyly, and that broke the spell. People smiled. Someone sighed softly. The baker walked over holding a steaming thermos and a paper bag. "You made her stop," he said, nodding toward the toddler who was now tugging her mother's sleeve and pointing at the piano. "So you've earned it." He handed over the bag. Inside, a fresh sourdough loaf still warm, and the thermos filled with vegetable soup. "Eat up," he said, "and you can come back tomorrow if you want." The old man's throat tightened. He didn't trust himself to speak, so he just nodded, clutching the food like it was treasure. Which, in a way, it was. He walked back to his bench, the bag cradled in his arms. He didn't open it right away. Instead, he sat and watched the bakery window. People were still glancing inside, some even pointing at the piano. A few new customers walked in, drawn by the quiet magic that had happened there. For the first time in months, he didn't feel invisible. He took a bite of the bread. It was crusty on the outside, soft within, with a tang that spoke of time and care. The soup was rich with carrots, celery, and herbs, simple but made with kindness. As he ate, he looked down at his hands. They were still old, still stiff, but they had done something today. They had made beauty. They had fed him, not just his body, but something deeper. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring. Maybe the baker would change his mind. Maybe no one would listen again. But for now, on this gray autumn morning, he had played. And someone had heard, and that was enough. Later, as he walked back to his room above the laundromat, the city seemed a little less cold. The wind still blew, the traffic still roared, but in his mind, the melody of Autumn Leaves played on. A quiet reminder that even in the falling season, there could be grace. He didn't know it yet. But his simple question, "Can I play for food?" had planted a seed. And seeds, even the smallest ones, have a way of growing when given just a little light. That night, as he lay on his narrow bed, listening to the hum of washing machines below, he thought about the piano. Not the one in the bakery, though he'd returned to it, but the music itself. It had never really left him. It had just been waiting for a reason to come back. And today, hunger had been that reason. Tomorrow, maybe it would be something else. Maybe joy, maybe connection, maybe the chance to give someone else what that little girl had felt. Wonder. He fell asleep with his hands resting on his chest, fingers slightly curled, as if still holding the shape of a cord. Outside, the city slept too. But somewhere in a warm bakery with a dusty piano, a new story had just begun. The next morning came sooner than he expected. He woke to the sound of a washing machine thumping through its final spin cycle downstairs, the rhythm oddly comforting. Sunlight, thin and pale, slipped through the gap in his curtains, painting a stripe across the worn rug. For a moment he just lay there, listening to the city stir outside. Delivery trucks rumbling, distant sirens, the clatter of a metal shutter being rolled up. Normal sounds, life going on. But something felt different. He sat up slowly, joints protesting as usual, but his mind was clearer than it had been in months. Last night's dream had been quiet. No hospital rooms, no empty chairs, no silence so thick it choked. Just music, soft, steady like a heartbeat. He made tea with the last of his bagged leaves. The water heated on a hot plate balanced on a stack of old phone books. As he sipped, his eyes drifted to the small window. Beyond the brick wall of the building across the alley, he could just make out the roof of the bakery. And that's when it hit him. He was going back, not because he was still hungry, though he was, but because yesterday, for the first time in a long time, he hadn't felt like a ghost. He'd felt seen, heard, like he still had something to give. He dressed carefully, brushing lint from his coat, straightening his collar. It wasn't much, but it was clean. He walked the same route as before, past the bus stop where teenagers huddled with earbuds in, past the flower stand just opening for the day, its buckets bright with chrysanthemums and sunflowers. The air smelled of damp pavement and coffee. When he reached the bakery, his steps slowed. A small crowd had gathered near the window. Not a big one, just 3 or 4 people, but they were looking inside, not at pastries, but at the piano in the corner. His heart thumped. The baker saw him coming and waved him in before he even reached the door. "You're back," he said, smiling like it was the most natural thing in the world. "I am," the old man replied, stepping inside. The warmth wrapped around him again, but this time it felt familiar, like returning to a place he'd known all along. "People have been asking about you," the baker said, lowering his voice. "Said they heard music yesterday that made them stop in their tracks. One lady came back twice just to see if you'd play again." The old man didn't know what to say. He just nodded, touched. "Well," the baker went on, "the piano's yours for as long as you want it, and I've got soup ready." Same as yesterday, he didn't need to be told twice. He walked to the piano, brushed the dust from the bench with his sleeve, and sat. This time his fingers didn't hesitate. He played Misty, a song full of gentle rain and quiet longing. It wasn't perfect. A few notes wavered, his left hand lagged just a hair behind. But the feeling was there, and that's what people heard. By the second verse, the bakery was full, not just of customers, but of stillness. Conversations dropped to whispers. A man on his phone lowered it slowly, eyes closed, just listening. Outside, someone paused mid-stride, turned and came in. When he finished, there was a beat of silence, then soft applause. Not loud, not showy, but real. Warm. The baker brought him a bowl of soup and a thick slice of rye bread. "You're becoming part of the furniture," he joked, but his eyes were kind. Days turned into a quiet routine. The old man arrived just after 10, played for an hour or so, ate his meal, and left before the lunch rush. Sometimes he played jazz standards, Blue Moon, All the Things You Are. Other times he'd slip in a classical piece, Debussy's Clair de Lune, or a simple Bach prelude. He never announced what he was playing. He just let the music speak. People started coming specifically for him. A retired school teacher brought her granddaughter every Tuesday. An office worker in a wrinkled suit would stand by the door during his break, eyes closed, shoulders relaxed for the first time all day. Someone even left a small tip jar on the piano, though he never touched it. The baker insisted it stay, saying, "It's not for you, it's for the music." Then came the morning when everything shifted. It had rained all night, and the streets glistened under a pale sun. The old man arrived to find the bakery unusually quiet. Only 2 customers, a woman reading a book and a man in a dark overcoat sitting alone at a corner table, sipping black coffee. He looked out of place. Not unfriendly, just separate. His clothes were expensive but understated, his posture straight, his eyes sharp as they scanned the room before settling on the piano. The old man sat down and began to play. He chose Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major, a piece he'd learned decades ago, one his wife used to hum while folding laundry. It was tender, a little sad, full of spaces between the notes where you could almost hear someone breathing. He poured everything into it. The loneliness. The memories. The stubborn hope that maybe beauty still mattered, even in a world that moved too fast to notice. When he finished, the woman with the book wiped her eyes. The man in the overcoat didn't move for a long moment. Then he stood, dropped a $20 bill on the table, far more than his coffee cost, and walked out without a word. The baker came over, shaking his head. "That guy, he owns half the tech buildings downtown. Comes in sometimes, always alone. Never says much. The old man just nodded. He didn't think much of it. Rich men came and went. They didn't stay for music, but the next day the man was back, same table, same black coffee, same stillness. This time the old man played Gershwin, something lighter, Someone to Watch Over Me. He didn't look at the man, but he felt his presence like a weight in the room. Afterward, the man stood again, left another bill, and left. On the third day, he stayed through 2 songs. On the fourth, he didn't leave right away. He lingered by the door, watching as the old man carefully closed the piano lid. Then, just as the old man turned to leave, the man spoke. "Do you know who I am?" His voice was calm, but there was an edge to it, like he was used to being recognized, respected, maybe even feared. The old man shook his head. "No, and it doesn't matter." The man's lips twitched, not quite a smile, more like surprise. Most people do. They either want something from me or they're afraid to speak. "I've got nothing to want," the old man said simply, "and I'm too old to be afraid." That seemed to catch the man off guard. He studied him for a long moment, then said, "You play like you've lived every note." "I have," the old man replied. The man nodded once, then walked out. But he kept coming back. Not every day, but often enough that the baker started saving his usual table. People whispered when he entered, some in awe, some in curiosity. He never interacted with anyone except the old man, and even then only with his eyes. He'd listen, sometimes with his fingers steepled under his chin, sometimes with his head tilted like he was solving a puzzle. One rainy afternoon, the bakery was nearly empty. Thunder rumbled in the distance and rain tapped steadily against the windows. The old man played a slow, improvised piece, just chords and a simple melody that came to him as he watched the droplets race down the glass. When he finished, the man stood and walked over. "Not to the door, but to the piano. That was yours?" he asked. "Yes." "Did you write it?" "Just now, or it wrote itself through me." The man was silent for a moment. Then, in a voice quieter than before, he said, "I studied piano as a boy. My mother made me. I hated it. Said it was a waste of time when I could be learning business." The old man waited. "I quit at 14, the man went on. Never touched another key after that. But I still hear it sometimes, in my head. The music I walked away from." There was something raw in his voice, something the old man recognized. Regret. The kind that doesn't shout, but sits quietly in your chest for years. "You can always come back to it," the old man said gently. The man almost smiled. "At my age? With hands that haven't played in 40 years? Music doesn't care about age," the old man said. "It only cares if your heart's still beating." The man looked at him for a long time. Then he said, "You're playing for food, but you're giving people something they can't buy." "I'm just playing," the old man said. "No," the man replied. "You're reminding them they're human." He turned and left, but this time he didn't drop money on the table. Instead, he placed a small card on the piano bench, plain white with just a phone number and a name. No title, no company, just a name. The old man didn't pick it up right away. He wasn't sure what to do with it. But the baker did. "He's serious," the baker said later after the man had gone. "I've seen him around for years. Cold as ice, they say. Never smiles. But these past weeks, he looks different, softer somehow." The old man tucked the card into his coat pocket. He didn't plan to call. What would he say? "Hello, I'm the piano man from the bakery. Can I help you with your existential crisis?" It felt strange, almost intrusive, but life had a way of pushing people together when they needed it most. A week later, the man returned, not during regular hours, but just after closing. The bakery was empty except for the baker wiping down counters and the old man putting on his coat to leave. "I'd like to talk," the man said. They sat at the corner table, steam rising from 2 mugs of tea the baker had quietly prepared before slipping out the back. "I'm hosting a charity event next month," the man began, "for music programs in schools that can't afford instruments or teachers. We've lost so much of that in the last decade." The old man listened. "I'd like you to play," the man said, "at the gala. It's at the Grand Hall downtown. 300 people, donors, city leaders, musicians." The old man's stomach dropped. I can't. "Why not?" "I haven't played in front of that many people in 30 years. And my hands—" "Your hands played Chopin like it was a prayer," the man interrupted gently. "That's not arthritis talking. That's soul. The old man looked down at his hands. They trembled slightly. What if I fail? What if you don't? The man countered. What if you remind a room full of powerful people that music isn't a luxury? It's a lifeline. That's what you've been doing here every day. The old man didn't answer right away. He thought of the little girl who clapped, the office worker who sighed like he'd been holding his breath for years, the woman who cried over Misty. Maybe it wasn't about him. Maybe it was about passing the light along. All right, he said finally. I'll do it. The man's shoulders relaxed just a fraction. Good, I'll take care of everything. The piano, the rehearsal space, even a therapist to help with your hands. You don't have to. I want to, the man said. Consider it. Payment for the meals you've given me. Meals, not food, the man said, meeting his eyes. Peace, clarity, a reminder that not everything in this world is for sale. They sat in silence for a moment, the rain still falling outside. Then the man stood. Rehearsal starts Monday. My driver will pick you up at 10. And just like that, the old man's quiet world expanded. The next Monday, a black car pulled up outside the laundromat. He'd never been in one before, not a real chauffeured car anyway. The driver helped him in, polite and quiet, and soon they were gliding through streets he usually walked. They arrived at a tall building, sleek and modern, all glass and steel. The man met him in the lobby, dressed casually for once, jeans and a sweater. This way, he said, leading him to a private elevator. They rose to the top floor. The doors opened to a space that stole the old man's breath. It was a penthouse, yes, but not what he expected. No cold marble or flashy art. Instead, warm wood floors, bookshelves filled with well-read books, and in the center of the living room, a grand piano. Not just any piano, a Steinway, polished to a soft gleam, its lid open like an invitation. Play something, the man said. The old man hesitated, then walked over. He sat. The keys were cool, responsive, alive under his fingers. He played the same nocturne from the bakery. This time, in this quiet, perfect room, it sounded even more beautiful. When he finished, the man was standing by the window, looking out at the city below. I forgot how much silence music can hold, he said. From that day on, they met twice a week. The old man rehearsed. The man listened. Sometimes they talked about music, about loss, about the strange way life circles back on itself. The man admitted he'd laughed the first time he heard the old man ask to play for food. Not out of cruelty, but disbelief. In his world, talent was packaged, marketed, sold. The idea that someone would offer it freely, humbly for a bowl of soup, it seemed impossible. But you proved me wrong, he said one afternoon. Talent isn't about fame. It's about truth. As the gala drew closer, the old man practiced harder than he had in years. His fingers ached, but a physical therapist sent by the man taught him exercises to ease the stiffness. He slept better, ate better, even started smiling more. People at the bakery noticed. You look lighter, the baker said one morning. I feel it, the old man replied. He still played at the bakery, but now it felt like preparation. Not just for the gala, but for something bigger. He wasn't just feeding himself anymore. He was feeding a purpose. And in the quiet moments between songs, he'd catch the man watching him, not with pity, not with admiration, but with something like gratitude, because sometimes the person who gives the music is the one who needs it most, and sometimes the person who listens is the one who's been starving all along. Rain tapped against the windows of the penthouse like soft fingers testing the glass. Inside, the room was quiet except for the low hum of the city far below, and the occasional creak of the grand piano bench as the old man shifted his weight. He'd been playing for nearly an hour, running through the pieces he'd chosen for the gala, smoothing out rough edges, letting his fingers remember what his mind sometimes forgot. His hands still ached, but it was a good ache now, the kind that came from use, not neglect. The man sat in a leather armchair near the fireplace, though no fire burned. He hadn't spoken in a while, just listened, eyes half closed, as if the music were lulling him into a place he hadn't visited in decades. There was a change in him lately, less rigid, less guarded. He still carried himself like someone used to giving orders, but his voice had softened. He asked questions now, real ones, not just polite filler. What made you choose that piece? Or did you ever write your own songs? He even admitted once that he sometimes dreamed about the piano he'd abandoned as a boy. the one his mother had saved for years to buy, only for him to walk away from it without a second thought. But not everything had changed. That afternoon, as the old man finished a particularly tender passage from Claire de Lune, the man stood abruptly. "You're ready," he said, his tone clipped, almost businesslike again. "The gala's in 10 days. You'll play Gershwin's Rhapsody in Blue. It's bold, recognizable, and it'll hold the room." The old man blinked. "Rhapsody, that's ambitious." "You can do it," the man said, already moving toward his desk. "I've heard you. You've got the heart for it. And I've arranged for you to rehearse on the actual stage next week." He said it like it was settled, and maybe it was. But something in his voice, just a slight edge, a flicker of impatience, made the old man uneasy. Still he nodded. "All right." The man turned, offering a tight smile. "Good, don't overthink it. Just play like you do here." But as the old man walked back to the elevator later, wrapped in the coat the man had quietly replaced last week, this one lined, warm, without patches, he couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. Not in the music, in the air between them. The next few days passed in a blur of practice and quiet anticipation. The bakery had become his anchor again. He played there every morning, not just to eat, but to stay grounded. The regulars greeted him like family now. The little girl brought him a drawing, a wobbly piano with a stick figure playing it, labeled Grandpa Music. He kept it folded in his pocket. Then came the day of the rehearsal at the Grand Hall. It was a massive space, high ceilings, velvet seats, a stage so wide it felt like standing on the edge of a cliff. Technicians moved lights, stagehands rolled out cables, and a tuner worked on the concert grand piano at center stage. The old man stood in the wings, suddenly small. The man arrived in a tailored suit flanked by 2 assistants. He greeted the old man with a quick nod. "Ready?" "I think so." "Good, they've got you scheduled for a full run-through in 20 minutes. He didn't stay. Said he had a meeting across town, but he'd be back for the final sound check." The old man watched him go, then turned to the piano. He sat. The keys were perfect, responsive even, full of potential. But the room was empty. No warmth, no faces. Just echoes. He began Rhapsody in Blue. The opening clarinet glissando he mimicked with his left hand, then dove into the sweeping chords. It was powerful, yes, but it felt hollow. Like shouting into a canyon and hearing only your own voice come back. Halfway through, he stopped. His hands trembled, not from pain, but from doubt. A stagehand paused nearby. "You okay, sir? I just need a moment." He stepped away, walked to the back of the hall, and sat on a folding chair in the shadows. His heart pounded. What was he doing here? He was a man who played for soup in a bakery, not for donors in tuxedos. The man had believed in him, yes, but maybe he'd been wrong. Maybe the magic only worked in small places with small hearts. He thought about leaving, just walking out, going back to his bench, his simple routine. But then he remembered the little girl's drawing. The office worker who sighed like he'd finally breathed. The woman who cried over a song about autumn. This wasn't just about him. He returned to the piano. This time he didn't play for the room. He played for them. For every person who'd ever felt invisible. He imagined the bakery around him. The smell of bread, the clink of cups, the soft murmur of lives intersecting. And slowly, the music came alive again. When he finished, the few crew members in the hall clapped. Genuine, surprised applause. The man returned just as he was packing up. "How'd it go?" he asked, scanning the room like he was assessing a business deal. "It went," the old man said simply. The man nodded, satisfied. "Good, you'll be fine." But there was no warmth in it. Just efficiency. The old man didn't mention how hard it had been. How lost he'd felt. He just thanked him for the ride home. That night, alone in his room, he practiced until his fingers burned. Not to impress, not to prove anything, but because the music wouldn't let him sleep until he got it right. The days leading up to the gala were tense. The man called twice, short practical calls about timing, attire, transportation. No small talk. No "how are you holding up?" Just logistics. The old man told himself it was fine. This was business, charity, not friendship, but it hurt more than he expected. Then, the morning of the gala arrived. He woke before dawn. The laundromat below was already rumbling to life. He dressed in the suit the man had sent. A deep navy, perfectly tailored, with a crisp white shirt. It felt strange, like wearing someone else's skin. He ran a hand over the fabric. It was expensive. Too expensive. He almost wanted to take it off, but he didn't. At 9, the black car pulled up. The driver helped him in, and they drove through streets dressed in evening lights. The city looked different at night, shimmering, expectant. The grand hall glowed under spotlights. Valets rushed. Guests in glittering gowns and sharp suits flowed up the steps like a river of elegance. The old man stepped out, clutching a small case with his sheet music, though he didn't need it. The pieces were etched into his bones. Inside, the buzz was electric. Champagne flutes clinked. Laughter rose and fell. String quartets played softly in the lobby. He was led to a green room. Plush chairs, bottled water, a mirror. He sat, trying to steady his breathing. Then the man walked in. He looked every bit the host. Impeccable suit, calm demeanor, the kind of confidence that came from knowing you owned the room before you even entered it. He smiled when he saw the old man. "You look great, thank you." "Nervous?" "A little." "Don't be. You belong here." The words should have comforted him, but they felt rehearsed, like something you say to a performer before they go on stage, not to a friend. The man checked his watch. "They'll call you in about 20 minutes. I'll be front row." He turned to leave, then paused. "Oh, and try not to linger too long between pieces. These people have short attention spans." The old man nodded, but something in his chest tightened. Alone again, he closed his eyes. He thought of his wife. She'd always said, "Play like you're talking to me." So he would. He'd play for her, for the little girl, for the baker, for himself, not for the crowd, not for the man. When his name was announced, a special performance by a local treasure, he walked onto the stage with his head high. The lights were blinding, the audience a sea of silhouettes. He sat at the piano. The instrument was magnificent, rich, alive. He placed his hands on the keys, and then he saw him, front row, the man, smiling politely, but his eyes were already scanning the room, nodding at someone in the back, whispering to the person beside him. The old man's stomach dropped. He took a breath. Began. He played Rhapsody in Blue not as a showpiece but as a story, of cities and dreams, of loneliness and joy, of a man who once played for food and now played for something far harder to name. The music swelled, dipped, soared. He forgot the crowd, forgot the suit, forgot the man. He played like his life depended on it, and when he finished, the silence was absolute. Then, applause. Not polite, not scattered. A wave of it, rising, crashing, filling the hall. People stood. Some wiped their eyes. A woman in the third row clutched her chest like her heart had skipped. The old man bowed, humbled, trembling. As he walked off stage, hands still buzzing with adrenaline, he expected to see the man waiting, proud, maybe even emotional. But the man wasn't there. He found him minutes later near the bar, deep in conversation with a group of well-dressed guests. He was laughing, loud, confident, the kind of laugh that commanded attention. When he saw the old man, he excused himself and walked over. "That was impressive," he said, sipping his drink. "Really, you had them in the palm of your hand." "Thank you," the old man said, voice quiet. "You'll be pleased to know we've already raised over 200,000 for the music fund. Your performance sealed the deal." The old man nodded. He should have felt happy, and part of him was, but another part felt used. The man leaned in slightly, lowering his voice. "Between us, I knew you had it in you, even when you doubted yourself." There it was again, that tone, not warmth, ownership. Like he'd discovered a rare artifact and polished it just enough to sell. The old man looked at him, really looked, saw the sharp eyes, the easy charm, the way he held his glass like a scepter. This wasn't the man from the penthouse who'd admitted his regrets. This was the millionaire, the one who laughed at the idea of playing for food, and in that moment, the old man understood. The man hadn't changed. He'd just found a new project. A touching story to boost his charity, his image, his legacy. The music had been real. But the connection? Maybe that had been part of the performance too. He didn't say anything, just thanked him again and walked away. Back in the green room, he changed out of the suit, folding it carefully, reverently, like returning something borrowed. He put on his old coat, the patched one, the real one, and slipped out a side door, avoiding the crowd. The night air was cool, clean. He walked, not toward the waiting car, but down the street, toward the familiar glow of the bakery district. He didn't know where he was going. Just away. Hours later, he sat on his usual bench, the city quiet around him. He pulled out the little girl's drawing from his pocket. It was crumpled now, but still bright. He thought about the applause, the money raised, the children who'd get to learn music because of tonight. That part was good. That part mattered. But he also thought about the look in the man's eyes during the performance. Not awe, not connection, but calculation. He'd gone into this hoping for understanding, maybe even friendship. Instead, he'd been a tool. A beautiful, useful tool, but a tool all the same. Tears pricked his eyes, not from sadness, but from clarity. He wasn't angry, just tired. Back in his room, he lay on the bed, listening to the washing machines below. The city slept. The gala was over. The story, as far as the world was concerned, had reached its happy ending. But for him, it felt unfinished. Because real healing doesn't come from standing ovations. It comes from being seen, not for what you can give, but for who you are. And tonight, for all the beauty he'd shared, he hadn't felt seen at all. He closed his eyes. The melody of Rhapsody still echoed in his mind, but now it carried a new note. One of quiet sorrow, of knowing the difference between being valued and being used. Outside, a lone taxi passed, its headlights sweeping across the ceiling like a searchlight. Somewhere, the man was probably giving interviews, accepting praise, planning his next grand gesture. And the old man? He was just a man again. Alone. But honest. And maybe, in the end, that was enough. He reached for the small radio on his nightstand, turned it on low. A jazz station played a soft trumpet solo, lonely, sweet, full of space. He listened until sleep came. And for the first time in weeks, he didn't dream of pianos. He dreamed of silence. And in that silence, he finally heard himself. The days after the gala passed in a quiet haze. The old man returned to his routine, waking to the thump of washing machines, making tea on his hot plate, walking the familiar streets. But something felt off. The bakery still smelled of bread and warmth. The piano still waited in the corner, but when he sat down to play, his fingers hesitated. The music was there, yes, but it felt distant, like a voice calling from another room. He'd play a few bars, then stop, staring at his hands as if they belonged to someone else. People still came to listen. The little girl waved from the doorway, her mother holding her hand. The office worker stood by the window, eyes closed, just like before. But the old man couldn't shake the feeling that he was performing, not sharing. That every note carried the echo of the grand hall, the weight of expectation, the ghost of that front row seat where the man had smiled, but not with his eyes. He didn't go back to the penthouse. No calls came, no messages. The suit hung in his closet like a costume from a play he hadn't wanted to be in. He told himself it was fine. He'd done his part. The music fund was growing. Kids would get lessons. That was what mattered. But at night, lying in bed, he'd replay the moment he walked off stage. The applause still ringing, the lights still bright, and wonder why it hadn't filled the hollow space inside him. Then one rainy Tuesday, the man appeared, not in a black car, not in a tailored suit, just standing outside the bakery under a plain black umbrella, collar turned up against the drizzle, looking smaller than the old man remembered. He didn't come in right away. Just watched through the window as the old man played a slow, simple version of Over the rainbow, the kind of song you hum when you're hoping for something better. When the last note faded, the man stepped inside. The bell jingled. A few customers glanced up, then looked away quickly. The baker froze mid-wipe, eyes wide. The old man didn't turn around. He just closed the piano lid gently and stood. "I didn't expect to see you," he said, voice calm but guarded. "I know," the man replied. He shook rain from his umbrella and leaned it by the door. "Can we talk?" The old man nodded toward the back table, the one farthest from the piano where no one ever sat. They sat across from each other. Rain tapped the windows. The bakery hummed softly around them. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then the man said, "I owe you an apology." The old man looked up, surprised. "I treated you like a means to an end," the man went on, eyes downcast. "Like your story was just useful. For the gala, for the press, for me." He paused, swallowed hard. "But that's not why I came back to the bakery all those weeks, not really." The old man waited. "I came because when you played, I felt something I haven't felt in 20 years, the man said quietly. "Peace, not because of the music itself, though it's beautiful, but because of how you offered it. No strings, no show, just truth." He looked up then, and his eyes were different. Softer. Tired even. "I laughed that first day," he admitted. "When you asked to play for food, I thought it was naive. In my world, everything has a price. Talent, time, kindness, it's all transactional. But you reminded me that some things can't be bought. They can only be given." The old man didn't say anything. He just listened. "I got carried away with the gala," the man continued. "I started thinking about optics, how it would look, how much we'd raise, how it would reflect on me. And in doing that, I forgot why I asked you in the first place." He leaned forward, elbows on the table. "I'm not proud of that. And I don't expect you to forgive me. But I needed you to know I see it now. What I did. How I made you feel." Silence settled between them, but it wasn't heavy. Just honest. Finally, the old man spoke. "I didn't play for you that night. I played for the people who've been listening to me in this bakery for months, for the ones who needed a moment of quiet in a noisy world." "I know," the man said, "and that's why it hurt so much when I realized I'd turned it into something else." The baker, pretending to organize jam jars nearby, quietly set 2 mugs of tea on the table and walked away. They sat with their tea, steam curling into the air. After a while, the man said, "I still believe in what we started. The music fund, it's real. The schools are already signing up. But I don't want to do it without you. Not as a performer. As a partner." The old man raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" "I've been thinking," the man said. "What if we didn't just give money? What if we gave presents? You could teach. Not in a concert hall, but in a real place, where kids who've never touched a piano can learn from someone who knows what music really is." The old man's breath caught. "Teach?" "Yes, at the community center downtown. They've got an old upright in the back room, barely used. We could fix it up. You could come twice a week. Just you, a few kids, and the keys. It sounded too simple. Too good. And you?" the old man asked. "I'll be there too," the man said. "Not as the donor. As a student." The old man stared at him. "You want to learn?" "I want to remember," the man corrected gently. "I want to sit at a piano again, not to impress anyone, not to fix my image, but because I miss it. Because maybe it's not too late to come back to something I walked away from." Something in the old man's chest loosened. Not all the way, but enough. He looked out the window. Rain still fell, but the sky was lightening. A delivery van pulled up, its driver whistling as he unloaded boxes of flour. "All right," the old man said finally, "but on one condition." "Name it." "You don't call me sir, and you don't treat me like a guest. You're just a student, like any other." A real smile, small but true, touched the man's lips. "Deal." They shook hands over the table, not like businessmen, but like two people starting over. The next week, they met at the community center, a modest brick building with peeling paint and a playground out back. Inside, the air smelled of chalk and old books. The piano was in a back room tucked beside stacks of board games and art supplies. It was out of tune, one key stuck. the bench wobbly on 3 legs. But it was a piano. The man had already arranged for a tuner to come and a carpenter to fix the bench. By the end of the day, it was playable. The old man sat down. He didn't play anything fancy, just a C major scale, slow and clear. Then he turned to the man who stood nervously by the door. "Sit," he said. The man sat on a folding chair, hands in his lap like a schoolboy. "First lesson," the old man said. "Music isn't about perfection. It's about listening. To the notes. To yourself. To the silence between." He placed the man's hands on the keys gently, like guiding a child. "Your fingers are stiff." "That's okay. They'll remember." The man pressed a key. The note rang out, slightly flat but honest. He looked up, eyes wide. "I haven't done that in 40 years. "Welcome back," the old man said. Over the next few weeks, they met every Thursday and Saturday morning. At first, the man struggled. His fingers fumbled, his timing was off, and he grew frustrated easily. But he kept coming. He didn't bring assistance. Didn't check his phone. Just showed up, sat down, and tried. And slowly, something changed. He laughed when he hit a wrong note. Really laughed. Not the polished chuckle from the gala. He asked questions. "Why does this chord feel sad?" Or "How do you know when to slow down?" He even brought sheet music, dog-eared and marked with pencil. Then the kids started coming. At first just one, a shy boy of 10 who'd been hanging around the center, drawn by the sound of piano. The old man invited him in, showed him middle C, let him press it over and over, grinning each time. Soon there were 3, then 5, boys and girls, all different, all curious. Some had never seen a piano up close. One girl said, "It's like a magic box." The old man taught them scales, simple songs, how to count beats with their feet. He didn't care if they were talented. He cared if they were willing to try. The man sat in the back, still learning his own lessons, but now he watched the kids too. Sometimes he'd stay after to help move chairs or wipe down the piano. Once he bought new music books for everyone. Plain, practical ones, no fancy covers. One afternoon, after the kids had left, the man stayed behind. "You're good with them," he said. "They remind me of me," the old man replied. Full of questions. Full of hope. The man was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I've been thinking, what if we did more than just lessons? What if we gave them a chance to share what they've learned? A little recital. Right here. For their families." The old man considered it. "They're not ready." "They don't have to be perfect," the man said, echoing the old man's own words back to him. "It's about listening. To themselves. To each other." The old man smiled. "All right. Let's do it." Planning the recital became their shared project. The man handled logistics, chairs, programs, refreshments. The old man chose the pieces, practiced with the kids, calmed their nerves. He even let the man play a short duet with one of the older boys, just 5 notes repeated, but the boy beamed like he'd won a prize. The night of the recital, the community room was packed. Parents, grandparents, siblings filled every chair. Some brought flowers, others just brought pride in their eyes. The kids played simple songs, Twinkle Twinkle, Ode to Joy, a bouncy version of Heart and Soul. Mistakes happened. A wrong note here, a skipped beat there, but no one cared. The room was full of warmth, of clapping, of "That's my kid," whispered with tears. When it was over, the man stood and thanked everyone, not as a donor, but as someone who'd been given a second chance. Then he turned to the old man. "This is what music is for," he said quietly. "Not gala halls, this." The old man nodded. He didn't need words. Later, as they locked up the center, the man said, "I've been offered a seat on the city's Arts Council. They want me to help shape funding for programs like this." "That's good," the old man said. "I told them I'd only do it if you're involved too. As an advisor." "Your voice matters." The old man stopped walking. Looked at him. "Why?" "Because you see what others miss," the man said. "You see the person behind the performance." They stood in the dim streetlight, the night cool and quiet. For the first time, the old man believed him. Not because of promises or plans, but because of the way the man looked at the kids, the way he listened, the way he'd come back not with a checkbook but with his hands open, ready to learn. The music hadn't fixed everything, but it had opened a door, and this time they were walking through it together. The invitation arrived on a Tuesday, slipped into the old man's mailbox along with his pension check and a flyer for a neighborhood cleanup. It was thick paper, cream-colored with elegant lettering that spelled out the details of a second charity gala. This one bigger, more formal, held in the same grand hall where he'd played months before. At the bottom, in neat handwriting, was a note. This time it's not about raising funds. It's about honoring those who give music its soul. Please say you'll come. He held the card in his hands for a long time. The last gala still lived in his bones. The blinding lights, the hollow applause, the feeling of being used like a prop in someone else's story. He'd almost thrown the invitation away. But then he remembered the community center, the kids tapping out heart and soul with proud, clumsy fingers, the man sitting in the back row with his own beginner sheet music, brow furrowed in concentration. Things had changed since then. Not everything, but enough. He didn't call right away. Instead, he went to the bakery the next morning, as he always did. The piano waited, dust-free now. Someone had started wiping it down every night. He played a gentle version of What a Wonderful World, not because he believed every word, but because he wanted to. The man walked in halfway through. He didn't sit at his usual corner table. He stood near the door, hands in his coat pockets, watching quietly. When the song ended, he approached. "You got the invitation," he said. "It wasn't a question, I did. I understand if you say no." The old man looked at him. "Why this time?" "Because this time it's yours," the man said. "Not mine. Not the donors, yours. We're calling it the music that feeds us, and you're the reason it exists." He paused, then added, "I've told them your story, the real one, not the polished version, the one about playing for soup because you believed music was worth sharing, even when no one was watching." The old man felt something shift inside him. Not excitement, not fear. Something quieter. Trust, maybe. "All right," he said. "I'll do it." This time, preparations felt different. No rushed rehearsals. No pressure to impress. The man came to the community center one evening after the kids had gone home, carrying a folder of sheet music. "I asked around," he said. "People kept mentioning one piece you played at the bakery early on. Gershwin. But not just any part. They said it felt like you were telling your whole life in a few minutes." The old man knew which one he meant. "Rhapsody in Blue," he said softly. "But I'd like to change it." "Change it how?" "I want to weave in other songs. The ones that mattered. Autumn Leaves and for her. Misty for the quiet mornings. Even a bit of that little tune I made up in the rain." The man's eyes lit up. "You'd compose your own version?" "Not compose," the old man corrected. "Remember." They spent the next 2 weeks shaping the piece together, not in a penthouse, but in the community center, under flickering fluorescent lights, with the smell of chalk and old wood in the air. The man listened as the old man played fragments, then stitched them together like a quilt made of sound. Sometimes the man would suggest a transition. Sometimes he'd just sit in silence, head bowed as if the music were washing over him. One evening, after a long session, the man said, "You know, I used to think music was about control, hitting the right notes, keeping perfect time, but you play like you're letting go." "That's when it starts to breathe," the old man replied. The night of the gala arrived wrapped in a soft spring drizzle. The city sparkled under streetlights, raindrops catching the glow like scattered stars. This time the old man didn't wear the navy suit. He wore a simple black jacket the baker had given him. For special occasions, he'd said, and his old trousers pressed clean. He didn't take the black car. He walked. Not because he wanted to prove a point, but because he needed to feel the ground beneath his feet. He passed the laundromat, the flower stand, the bus stop where the teenagers now waved when they saw him. He even stopped at the bakery. It was closed, but someone had left a single sunflower on the piano bench tied with a ribbon. He smiled. At the grand hall, there was no red carpet, no flashing cameras. Just a quiet entrance, a friendly usher, and a green room that felt more like a waiting area than a stage prep zone. The man met him there not in a tuxedo, but in a dark suit with a loosened tie. "You look like yourself," he said. "Finally," the old man replied. They sat together in silence for a few minutes. No small talk, no last-minute instructions. Just two people who'd come a long way sitting side by side. When his name was called, the old man stood. The man stood too. "I'll be front row," he said. "But this time I'll be listening, not watching." The old man walked onto the stage alone. The hall was full, but it felt different. Softer. The lights were warm, not harsh. The audience wasn't a sea of strangers in jewels and cufflinks. They were teachers, community leaders, parents from the music program, even a few kids from the center, wide-eyed in their Sunday clothes. He sat at the piano. The instrument was the same grand as before, but tonight, it felt like an old friend. He placed his hands on the keys, and he began. Not with the bold opening of Rhapsody, but with the gentle, aching notes of Autumn Leaves, the song he'd played that first morning for a loaf of bread. It floated through the hall like a memory, tender and true. Then seamlessly he wove in Misty, the melody curling like morning fog. A few people in the front row leaned forward, recognizing the threads of songs they'd heard in the bakery, in the rain, in quiet moments when they needed comfort most. Then came the shift. The music swelled. Gershwin's bold, brassy spirit surged through the keys, confident, joyful, full of city life and dreams. But it wasn't just imitation. It was conversation. Between past and present, between loss and hope, between a lonely old man and the world that slowly learned to listen. He played with everything he had, not for perfection, but for truth. His fingers ached, yes, but they also sang. Every missed note, every slight hesitation, only made the music more human. And that's what people heard. In the third movement, he slipped in the little melody he'd made up during the rain, the one with no name, just a few chords that said, "I'm still here." A woman in the second row wiped her eyes. A man in the back bowed his head. The kids from the community center sat perfectly still, as if afraid to breathe, and in the front row the man didn't look around. Didn't check his phone. Didn't smile for show. He just listened, eyes closed, one hand resting over his heart. When the final chord faded, a soft, resolved note that hung in the air like a sigh. The silence was deep, sacred. Then slowly, someone stood, then another. Then the whole room rose to their feet. Not because it was expected, but because they couldn't stay seated. The music had reached into them and pulled something loose. Grief, joy, memory, longing, and they needed to move, to honor it. The old man bowed, humbled, tears blurring his vision. He didn't see the standing ovation. He felt it, in the warmth of the room and the sound of clapping that didn't stop, in the way the air itself seemed to vibrate with gratitude. Backstage, the man was waiting. Not with a handshake or a businesslike "well done." He simply opened his arms, and the old man stepped into the hug. No words. Just two men, one who'd forgotten how to feel, and one who'd almost stopped believing he mattered, holding on to each other in a quiet hallway while the world celebrated the music they'd helped bring back to life. Later, during the reception, people came up to him, not to flatter but to share. A teacher said, "My students won't stop talking about your story." A young pianist said, "You reminded me why I started playing." Even the event organizer, usually all schedules and budgets, said quietly, "That was the most human thing I've heard in years." But the moment that stayed with him happened near the end of the night. One of the kids from the community center, a small girl with braids, tugged his sleeve. She held out a folded piece of paper. "For you," she whispered. He opened it. It was a new drawing. This time it showed two people at a piano, one old, one younger, fingers on the same keys. Above them, musical notes floated like birds. At the bottom, in careful letters, "Music is sharing." He tucked it into his pocket right next to the first one. As he left the hall, the rain had stopped. The city breathed in the cool night air. The man walked with him to the bus stop. "You'll keep teaching, won't you?" the man asked. "Every week," the old man said, "and I'll keep learning." They stood in silence for a moment, watching headlights glide down the wet street. Then the man said, "I've decided to step down from the board of my company. Take a smaller role. Spend more time here." With this, the old man looked at him. "You don't have to do that for me." "I'm not," the man said. "I'm doing it for me. You showed me there's more to life than building things that don't last." The bus arrived with a soft hiss of brakes. The old man stepped on, turned, and nodded. "See you Saturday," he said. "See you Saturday," the man replied. As the bus pulled away, the old man looked out the window. The grand hall lights faded behind him, but the music stayed, alive in his chest, in his hands, in the quiet hum of a city that, for one night, had remembered how to listen. And for the first time in a long time, he didn't feel like he was playing for food. He was playing because he had something worth giving, and that was enough. Spring settled into the city like a slow, warm sigh. The cherry trees along the park bloomed pink and white, petals drifting onto sidewalks like confetti from a quiet celebration. The bakery's windows stayed open more often now, letting in the smell of fresh air along with the scent of bread. And in the corner, the old upright piano no longer gathered dust. Someone played it every morning, sometimes the old man, sometimes a teenager from the community center, sometimes even the baker himself, fumbling through Fur-Elise with a grin. Life hadn't become perfect, but it had become full. The old man still lived above the laundromat, though the room felt different now, not like a place to hide, but a place to rest between moments that mattered. He still made tea on his hot plate, still walked the same streets, but now people waved. Kids called out "Grandpa music" as he passed the schoolyard. Shopkeepers saved him the last croissant. It wasn't fame. It was belonging. Every Tuesday and Saturday he went to the community center. The piano there had been tuned, repaired, even given a small plaque on the side. Where music begins. The room was rarely empty. Children came after school. Retirees dropped in during lunch. And sometimes on quiet afternoons, the man would arrive with his beginner's notebook, sit in the back, and practice scales with the focus of someone rediscovering a lost language. He wasn't a prodigy. He never would be. But he played with care now, with the kind of attention that said, "This matters," and that was enough. One Saturday, as the old man helped a shy boy find middle C for the 10th time, the man lingered after the lesson. The kids had gone. The room was quiet except for the hum of the radiator. "I've been thinking," the man said, leaning against the piano. "What if we opened this up? Not just lessons, but a real space where anyone can come, play, listen, even just sit and heal." "You mean like a music house?" the old man asked. "Exactly. No auditions, no fees, just open doors." The old man looked around the room, the scuffed floor, the mismatched chairs, the sunlight streaming through the high windows. "This already is that place. But what if we made it official?" The man pressed gently. "With proper instruments, maybe a small stage for recitals, even a little library of sheet music. I've spoken to the city. They'll match my donation if we can show community support." The old man didn't answer right away. He walked to the window and watched a mother push a stroller past the playground. "You know," he said, "I used to think music was something you gave to people, but I've learned it's something you grow together." "That's why I want you to lead it," the man said, "not as a figurehead. As the heart of it." The old man turned. "And you?" "I'll be the hands," the man said with a small smile. "The ones that build, fix, fund, but never control." They looked at each other, and in that moment there was no millionaire, no lonely grandpa. Just two people who'd found each other through broken chords and honest notes. "All right," the old man said, "but only if the first rule is no one plays alone." The man nodded. "Agreed."